thinking about my own experience and about some of the things we were talking about yesterday and how tough it is to figure out what the appropriate boundary is when we're no longer in a job necessarily, because like some of the peer specialist jobs, these are the boundaries you have to follow. But what makes an effective peer support person breaks down some of those boundaries, and breaking down those boundaries actually makes me vulnerable to getting hurt. And so how do we, and this I don't have the answer, which is why we need to talk about it so I can learn. How do we figure out how to set those boundaries and keep ourselves safe, yet be effective peer support specialists or peer support friends? Because what makes us effective is the fact that we've walked the same journey and those boundaries are down. Things went out of control for him and I was able to help. And at some point that help became enabling him. And part of that was me not having clear boundaries on how I'm able to help. And part of it also became invasive to me, you know, and where do we sit? And then in the past couple of weeks I have another friend who found himself in a crisis and has no place to live and he's reaching out for help. It's like, oh no, 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 no. So all of a sudden I'm not able to provide that support that was helpful because I can't figure out how to do it well. So how do we, you know, how do you help without enabling? And how do you help while protecting yourself?
So I think maybe a good question before we do that is we need to define what our space is. You know, what is it that we need just even on a daily basis for us to be healthy?
What we need?
Yeah, and I'm really talking about that space. What is yours? What are, when I'm thinking of space and I'm thinking about things that I need, and I think we also have to kind of define relationships a little bit as part of this discussion. There are people who are my friends. There are people that I serve as part of my work. Some of those people end up being both. Okay, and yet the longer I'm in this business, I can't be all things to all people. You know, and so it's really trying to define that, and that gets hard because some people are going, well, you give these other people time, but you don't give me time. So it's really kind of figuring out, defining relationships. And before I define a relationship, I'm going to talk about my space with folks. There's some basic rules that I've kind of started running into. One is that my space is absolutely my space in private after 10 o'clock in the evening. Okay. Now, if it is truly an emergency, and I define with people what an emergency is, I will take your phone call. I have a friend who will call me at 4 o'clock in the morning in crisis. Okay. But that crisis is often, I'm stuck downtown and I need to ride back to my house because I can't drive. Which is not exactly a crisis, which is you need to get a taxi. Issue.
Or you didn't catch a bus.
Yeah. Well, in Richmond you can't do that, but you can certainly get a taxi. And so, I mean, and I've had to learn kind of through those. And some of the folks that we work with, part of what's going on with them is that they're reaching out for our attention. You know, and that's a hard call sometimes for me between, you know, am I helping them or am I enabling them? You know, and I will just share with you, I had one incident where a person called me in crisis. They definitely said all the right things. It was about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. You know, and so I went to their house to kind of check on them. And they had actually told me they'd overdosed before I got there. There were pills everywhere. As it turns out, they'd only taken 1 or 2 pills. But we went through this whole kind of situation. You know, and if I had to do it again, I'd probably do it the same way. But I have to be careful of setting myself up for being in those situations. Because it's not good for them and it's not good for me. I can't spend all night with folks and try to go all day. And when I'm really finding it out that I probably wasn't the best person to help that person in that. So this kind of physical space, you know, when I take phone calls and when I don't, when I caller ID. what is work stuff? What is my home life stuff? Are those, and really allowing those to be separate. These are very, very intense human situations. And as I'm stepping back and kind of listening to this, because that wasn't, I wasn't in your particular experience, so I'm seeing it differently. I can only see it from where I'm sitting.
Here you go, Bonnie.
Oh, thanks, Kip.
But, part of this is about self-preservation. If we don't take care of ourselves, okay, we're not going to be of any good to anybody else. It's the same theory as when you fly and they tell you to put the oxygen mask on you before you put the oxygen mask on the baby.
We just talked about that yesterday.
And so, and part of it is also understanding what our part is and also understanding what the other person's part is. And also understanding when we may be in over our heads. In that sometimes, it's tough. I think it's easy, it's not easy. I think that we can sometimes get into situations where we know some other strategies and we know how to de-escalate things. And sometimes you have to make the call and go, I'm in over my head, I need to call crisis intervention or somebody else to do what I'm not prepared to do. And sometimes I'm too close to it, and I